In this lesson, we would like to know why friction exists. Of course, that point we have already explained in the previous part, that it is because of the interlocking of the irregular surfaces that are in contact. This interlocking of the irregular surfaces. Each body is having a irregular surface. When you keep one body over the other body, then this irregular surface get interlocks with the other irregular surface, and hence there is a friction who is opposing a relative motion. Here we would like to know further that what happens to the friction is it is opposing the relative motion. So when one body is over the other body, like it is pointed out in the diagram, it looks as if like these two regular surfaces are in contact, two smooth surfaces are in contact. But because the surfaces are quite irregular, at few places there will be interlocking between them, which is opposing the relative motion. Now if you want to reduce the friction, what we can do is we have to reduce the interlocking. How can we reduce the interlocking? Is simply by reducing the irregular surfaces. How can we reduce the irregular surfaces? By doing a kind of polishing on any surface. That's why we always try to polish the body. Is smooth, will make it smooth, therefore friction can be reduced. So what happens when you reduce the friction is automatically the surface won't become that much rough, therefore there won't be that much of the interlocking from this stage to this stage, therefore friction can be reduced. Therefore if you want to reduce the friction, if you want to save your energy, if you want to apply less force on your body to move the body, what we can simply do is we can polish a body. By polishing a body, we can reduce the interlocking and therefore we can reduce the friction also. But what happens if you keep on polishing the surface? What happens? Let us try to analyze. So when you keep on polishing, irregular surfaces will be keep on decreasing, and somewhere theoretically interlocking has to become nil, therefore friction has to become nil. But practically it will never happens like that the friction becomes zero. It happens like when the molecules, when the bodies are made very smooth, the interlocking won't be there between the surfaces because there is no irregular surfaces, because we have polished it a lot. But what happens is the molecules of the upper surface of the body comes very close to the molecules of the other surface of the body. Therefore what happens when the molecules comes closer? Between the molecules there is always a force of attraction called adhesive force of attraction. I am calling this adhesive because these are two different kinds of the bodies. The force between them is called adhesive force of attraction. If the molecules are of the similar type, that could be called as a coercive force of attraction. Therefore whether it is coercive or adhesive, it is always an attractive force. So what happens is molecules comes very close to each other, between them adhesive force of attraction starts developing, which again opposes the relative motion. Therefore friction can only be minimized, but friction cannot be reduced to that of the zero. So the conclusion that what we want to say is friction can be minimized. Friction can be practically minimized, but we cannot reduce it to zero. But it cannot be reduced to zero. It is against the nature that friction cannot become zero. Fine. Anyway, to minimize this friction, there are different methods, like we can polish the surfaces, therefore interlocking will be less. We can use lubricants like oils and greases, which can reduce the friction. We can shape the bodies properly, therefore streamlining can happen and the frictions can be reduced. We can use ball bearings which will between the two bodies, which will reduce the friction. With all these methods you can reduce the friction, but you can minimize the friction, but you cannot make it a zero. So what happens, for example, if we are able to reduce the friction to zero? Of course we know that practically friction cannot be reduced to zero, if at all. If we are able to reduce the friction 0, it looks like a rosy world that we need this petrols, diesels for all our vehicles like cars, whatever you use. We need petrol for them to actually overcome the friction that exists between the rough road and the rough tire. But what if there is no friction? Then there is no interlocking, your vehicle is not going to stop. Then you don't need a lot of petrol and diesel to run the show. You just need to initiate the process. You can initiate the process and things will be going forever. There will be never a machine that is lost its quality. It works as if like it is first day, it will work forever because there is no opposition, there is no wear and tear of the parts. Therefore it looks like a quite rosy world that everything is quite smooth, but it has lot of things, lot of issues that how do a vehicle stop? You have a petrol-less vehicle because there is no friction. But what happens when you apply the brake? The friction has to be generated between the bodies and the road, therefore the vehicle is supposed to stop. Now what happens? There is no friction, therefore your vehicle will never stop. You will be keep going, that you will be never able to stop. You will be walking on the surface. You are able to walk because there is an interlocking between the shoes and the surface. What happens? If there is no interlocking, then you will be slipping away. You cannot hold a glass, that will be slipping from your hand. I cannot talk, my tongue will be slipping over the inner parts of the mouth. Therefore, imagine the world without a friction. It is so chaotic such that we cannot survive. That's why friction only has to be reduced, but friction shall not be reduced to 0. It can reduce it, we can reduce it. We can keep it at minimum, but we cannot reduce it to 0. That's why without friction we cannot survive, because no basic things in the life goes in a very irregular and unsystematic way. That's why people call the friction as necessary evil. Evil is a bad thing. We don't want a evil, but we call this as a necessary evil. It's a bad thing, but we cannot survive with this without this evil. Therefore, friction is being called like a necessary evil.